Welcome back. Glad you're here. If this is your first time with us, welcome. I'm happy to see you, even though I can't see you and I may never see you. But I wish you were sitting right here with me. I'd share this really wonderful bourbon with you. Might even kick back and put our feet up and light a cigar together. But hey, this will have to do, right? So let's talk today about the rise of the virtual workplace. We've all experienced it. Some of us love it. I love the virtual workplace, get a real kick out of it, enjoy it a lot. Some of us hate it. Some things about the workplace, this virtual connected workplace, are a whole lot better. And other things are admittedly a whole lot worse. But it's here to stay. And it's clear now that as leaders and managers and supervisors, as influencers of people trying to get them to do great things, that we need to adapt our leadership approach, perhaps even adapt our own self-disciplines if we're going to be effective in a virtual workplace. Because leadership is hard, but let's not make it harder than it needs to be. So here are a few things that we have learned in our enterprises and from really sharp people who have virtual organizations as well over the last few years that might be of help. So look for yourself as I go through these perspectives. You'll probably see yourself, and you might be pretty good at some of this stuff. So first, right out of the gate, you know that leadership is mostly about presence. It's about your presence and about my presence as a leader. Our values and our mental models and our habits and our disciplines and our observable skills only get traction when people are in our presence. They got to be with us. We got to be with them. So we lead best when we are present, right? Rocket surgery, right? Leadership by remote control just doesn't work. All right, here's the second thing we've learned. We know that the virtual workplace is a whole lot easier for introverts than it is for extroverts. Now you know that. This is Myers-Briggs stuff from way back in the day, and an introvert is someone who, when they're under pressure, prefers to go into their inner thoughts and their inner world and build this whole world. And it's not like they don't like people. It's not like introverts don't want to be around people. It's just that as an introvert, our battery is drained the more we're in this outer world of activity and people and conversation and bumping elbows and all that stuff. It's fine. We might like it a lot, but it just drains our battery. An extrovert, on the other hand, is someone whose battery is charged up in the outer world and drained when they are alone. So you can easily see that with that description, that an introvert is better fitted for a virtual environment than an extrovert is. But we both need to be able to function well in the environment. It's also, we've learned that quite a bit easier to accomplish what we've come to call deep work in a virtual workplace than it is to accomplish shallow work in a virtual workplace. I recommend again to you Cal Newport's work by that title, Deep Work, in which he describes the difference between the two kinds of work and how to make sure that you get both kinds of work done. Deep work is just what it sounds like. You got to pull away, shut the doors, turn off distractions, and dive deeply into the swimming pool of your work or into the sea of your work. It's where judgment and creativity and innovation and planning and all that stuff comes from. And shallow work is just that series of tasks you do that could be done in a minute or 5 minutes or 30 seconds at a time. You just chunk it together and get it done. So we know that virtual work and the virtual work environment is really a whole lot more fitted, more suited to deep work. Here's the third idea. Remember, as a leader, your job and my job is to get results, not to just get a bunch of random tasks done. And you and I do that by creating and energizing and making sure that this leadership flywheel about which we have spoken in other videos happens. The leadership flywheel, imagine it this way, it's like a circle, and leadership creates structure, visible, invisible, mental models, processes, walls, doors, finances, all that stuff. Leaders create structure. It's structure that defines and creates culture. It's culture that defines and creates repeated behaviors that are the right behaviors. And it's those right behaviors that get us results. And those results put pressure back on the leader to be a better leader. That's called the leadership flywheel. We know that that's your job as a leader, to get that flywheel going and to keep it going. Here's the fourth thing we've learned. We know that you and I as leaders have two jobs. Just like the Pinterest fail. You had one job and then they couldn't even do that one job. Well, you and I have two jobs as leaders. Our job is to create clarity and to create alignment. Clarity about where we're going and why we're going. Clarity about what matters. And alignment has to do with how we structure our work so that my work and your work fit well together and we're not bumping into each other or dragging one another needlessly, slowing one another down. Okay, knowing these things then, how do you and I lead in a virtual workplace? What are the skills and what are the competencies that you and I need? Well, here are some competencies. If you and I are to lead well in a virtual work environment, or what is sometimes been called a hybrid work environment, where people go off into their virtual worlds like gophers and then come running together every once in a while, that's a hybrid environment, has the same kind of challenges. So the first competency you and I need is we have to have this internal, get it done engine that does not require a perpetual jump start from other people. The second competency we have to have is we need to be mentally disciplined so that we can focus on what matters and we are not easily distracted, and then we have the grit to stay with that focus until it's finished. Third competency we need to have is that we have emotional disciplines so that we are not easily discouraged or drawn into drama that's brought to us by other people. Another competency that you and I need to have is we have to have the physical disciplines and indeed the love of physical disciplines so that we can stay energetic and healthy. You know what it's like? You sit in a virtual environment all day long and it is physically draining. In some ways more so than being drained, than working in a physical environment than a non-physical environment. So here's the fifth one. You have a strength-based mindset. That is, when you look at everyone and everything, you look first to find out what their strengths are or what a project's strengths are, what's working well, and you build around strengths. In fact, even when someone presents a problem or a challenge to you, you immediately go on a hunt for the strengths. That's a mindset that you have, and it's a powerful competency. So before we talk about skills, remember the difference between skills and competencies. A competency shows up everywhere. Everywhere. It's at your family reunion, it's in line at Starbucks, it's at work, it's with your family. You have those competencies, they're with you and operating all the time. They're like the operating system of your life. Skills are different because skills are defined and designed to be used in very specific settings. You don't use them all the time. You only use them where they're needed. So those were a list of competencies. Let's look at the skills. Here it is. This is a skill. You ruthlessly eliminate hurry. Virtual work does not save time. We all thought it would be so much more effective, and it looked like it was at first. It looked like when everyone retreated into their caves and did a bunch of virtual work that everyone got very, very productive, and all the measurements, productivity went up about 40%, except that there was something missing in that equation and in that measurement. Creativity and innovation plateaued and went down. Because virtual work is often work alone, and creativity and innovation sparks off one another. You and I working side by side trying to innovate or create something, even though those two things might not be related, are more creative when we're together than when we are apart. So we find that virtual work does make us more efficient in some ways, but significantly less efficient in others. And so in the ways that matter, you and I have to apply this axiom to ruthlessly eliminate hurry, because we cannot speed up judgment, connecting with people, and communication. Simply not possible. So here's the second skill that you and I need to have, and that has to do with connecting. The skill is to connect first, then go to content. Make sure when you're interacting with people in a virtual environment as a leader or manager or a supervisor, that you connect with the person. Figure out who that person is. What's the context that they came out of? Ask questions like, hey, what were you just working on? Why did you do this last weekend? It sounds silly, but if you do not connect with that person first, you're going to miss the context in which they are communicating. You miss it completely. And you need to be able to be energetic when you do that. Bring your best energy to connecting with people. Someone once said to me recently, you know, the camera adds 10 pounds and the camera removes 20 pounds of enthusiasm. So if you're on a Zoom call with somebody, or you're in Microsoft Teams or some environment like that, and it's just a flat surface you're communicating with them, maybe even on the phone, your enthusiasm and your passion and your joy for life will be cut way down. It just doesn't come across like it does when you're in person. So practice this simple skill. Connect first, content second. The third skill is to focus. Focus. You've got to eliminate all the distractions when you're communicating with somebody virtually. Get rid of the noise in the background, get rid of the distractions that might be on the video or on the phone, and focus, focus, focus. The next skill is to prompt discussions about the impacts of decisions that you're making on other people. If we're all together in the same room, those impacts come out, because if you have an idea and I say, that's a great idea, and someone's sitting right over there and they think it's a bad idea, they will sniff or snort or move in the chair or roll their eyes, and we'll turn to that person and say, what are we missing here, right? But we really don't get that in a virtual environment. People will just kind of let it go. So you and I as leaders need to prompt discussions about the impacts of what we're talking about on people who maybe are in on that video call or in on that phone call, or perhaps who are not in on that call at all. A dear friend of mine named John says that we're all connected, especially in a work environment, and we're all connected as though we have invisible wires between us. And whenever I move, I'm going to pull on that invisible wire that connects you and I. I love that mental picture. Here's the next skill. Create margins in your calendar so that you can be responsive and available to people. If we were physically together, you could walk by me and see me getting coffee and connect for 3 minutes. You could see me going down the hallway to run down to get lunch. We would connect in a very natural and fluid kind of way in most kind of environments, but not so in a virtual environment. You have no idea where I am or what I'm doing. And we have no idea. So we only tend to connect intentionally through phone calls or video calls or emails. We've got a dear friend, Donnie and I, whose name is Brian, and this guy is one of the most connected, available, and responsive people. He's a leader of a very significant and very large organization, and a very challenging organization as well. And I'll bet right now I could whip my phone out and send him a text and he'd answer. Moreover, if I send him a text, say, hey Brian, how's your day going? He'd probably call me, right? Isn't that right, Donnie? Wouldn't he do that? He's that responsive to us. This guy's a great model for us. He's incredibly responsive in that way. So he doesn't live in a world where he's unresponsive. Also, another skill you and I want to apply is, since you have that mindset I mentioned earlier, that you are a strength-based mindset, you want to apply what's called appreciative inquiry whenever a problem is brought to you. Appreciative inquiry, especially in its earliest forms when it was described, was extremely valuable. It got weird as time went on, but the earliest stuff is basically this idea that if ever presented with a problem, something you need to fix or solve or intervene in some way, or a challenge that you're having, always look for where it's already been solved. It's not called the same thing, and it's not with the same people, so you have to look a while to find it. But this has already been solved. Maybe it's already been solved even in your own team, or in that person's life in another part of their job, or at home. They've already solved this problem. So go on a search to find out what the problem is and where it's already been solved. Dive into that, understand how it was solved, and then apply that back to the current problem or challenge that you've got. So that's a skill you want to apply, and use that in virtual environments. It makes people significantly more engaged. 2 more skills. You clarify your expectations. You're always talking expectations. Here's what I expect. Here's why that's important to me. And is that realistic? And the 4th tool or skill, it's not a tool, skill that you and I want to have to do really, really well in a virtual environment is we celebrate. Pick moments, even in a virtual environment, especially in a virtual environment, where you celebrate briefly with one another whenever something has been created or finished. So, there's a leadership communication hierarchy within a virtual work environment. Always use the highest possible level of communication. Here it is. In-person communication is the king of all communication. Right under that would be video communication. If you can't do in-person, default to video. If you can't do video, default to phone. If you can't do phone, default to text. If you can't do text, default to email. If that's not going to work, you need to communicate with lots of people, default to creating some sort of a memo. If that doesn't work, do smoke signals. If that doesn't work, give up. But understand that always go to the higher level of communication. Somebody sends you an email, pick up the phone, call them, or FaceTime them. Get them in front of a video instead of going back and forth in the lowest level of communication because you think it saves time. It does not save time. It actually takes longer to send 13 emails than it does to have a 2-minute conversation with somebody on the phone, face-to-face, or in video. All right, it's a lot different to lead in a virtual work environment. Be careful, you probably already know this, right? Not to make the mistake that just because a virtual environment saves some time and money logistically, that it's going to be more efficient relationally. It is not. Leadership happens by being present. Leadership happens when we connect with people, and out of that connection and out of being focused and present as a leader, then judgment is applied. People are empowered and encouraged. It's crucial that you do that. So stay as high as you can on that communication hierarchy list. All right, here's some final thoughts. Hiring somebody to lead in a virtual environment, make sure that those people have a track record of functioning very well in a virtual environment. Otherwise, you're going to have to train them up, and the mess that they will make before they get trained up is going to be pretty hard to recover from. Well, there you go. There we have it. I hope this was really helpful to you. If you enjoyed it, click that thumbs up, like button. That lets me know that you had a good time with this and it was helpful for you. Lets the rest of us on our crew know that this is worthwhile. If it was really worthwhile to you, how about subscribe? Well, these pop out fairly regularly. And so if you subscribe and hit the bell that goes with it, you know the drill. What happens is you get notified, and it tends to show up more on your YouTube feed whenever you just open that up on your homepage. So once again, I appreciate it. Thanks for taking some of your very precious time and sitting down and thinking through some of this with me. I appreciate it a lot. You got great work to do. Keep it up.